Right now, the U.S. is imposing sanctions. Sanctions are, it's a form of economic warfare, and it has a big implication for the dollar, right? Okay, now others are trying to get out of the dollar system. There's a dollar system that now is being changed. India is dealing directly with Russia and holders of dollar denominated assets. Don't want to hold those dollar assets if they feel that they're going to be grabbed and so on. So what's happening now has happened many times before. And I learned this in my past because, well, just quickly, in 1971, I was clerking on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and President Nixon gets on and he says, we're not going to give you the gold that the dollar is backed by, and we had a devaluation. It took me by surprise. I walked on the floor of the stock exchange. I thought it was going to go down a lot. It went up a lot. And that's because I never experienced the currency devaluation. I found the same exact thing when I studied history. Same exact announcement took place on March 5th, 1933 by Roosevelt and had the same effect. So I understood then how history before me was important. Studying the Great Depression allowed me and Bridgewater to anticipate the 2008 financial crisis. If I didn't study that, what's happening now is very relevant. The past is a guide to what's happening now. As we are approaching a challenging of the world order, in other words, a great power challenging another, there is an increased likelihood of some kind of war. There are 5 kinds of wars. There's a trade war, a technology war, a geopolitical influence war, a capital war, which we're in the midst of, and then there's a military war. And those things drive countries to be self-sufficient and independent. And as a result, globalization diminishes, nationalism increases. It's not the stock market. Stock market, so it's in the book, it takes you through the stock markets during war periods. And so the only thing that matters for stocks is the cash flows. And as you get into the conflict, that's a different story. If you begin to see as it progresses, those that are affected by the individual events have an effect. For example, tech stocks. But anyway, in answer to your question, how does it affect the markets? It affects the value of money most fundamentally. Like what we're seeing now is that the value of money, when you run very large deficits, and you have to spend a lot. You have to spend a lot on social programs. You have to spend a lot on defense. You have to spend a lot on environmental programs and so on. And so when you spend a lot more money than you earn, then you have to print money to make up that difference, to make the purchases. And then that devalues money. And so it's like the examples I gave you of the 2 currency devaluations that you had before. 1971 led to the inflationary period of the 1970s. And so you have the stock market. Yes, the stock market goes up and other things, but cash is trash. And people begin to learn that the bonds that they're holding have negative returns. And it starts to change the value of money, the value of dollars and so on. So money goes into other assets. It produces more of an inflation, and you start to enter a certain type of environment. And the environment that we're in is beginning to be very much like that of the 1970s. Well, there's 2 ways of dealing with debt. You pay it back in hard money, or you pay it back in soft money. You pay it back in hard money, and you have a problem. You have a depression. So throughout history, whenever that was done, pay it back in hard money. Eventually, that was abandoned, and you print money. That was what 71 was. That was what March 1933 was. And so I think that what you have to think about is the value of money. How much money does one have in debt instruments? And do you want to own that as an asset? I think they're bad assets. And so, and then how do you diversify? And the system also has to deal with what is money? What is money? Is the dollar going to remain the same sort of reserve currency. And then you see the development of alternative monies. We're seeing a variety. I think different types of money will compete with each other in the environment we're in. Some, maybe it's crypto, maybe it's gold, maybe it's other things. Maybe the digital renminbi competes with the US dollar. We're going to come into an environment. Think about how much money is being stored in debt instruments, those debt assets. Think about how poor those returns are. So that kind of a shift, I think, is very important. So all currencies have a lot of debt. So when you look at one relative to the other, there will be a lot of printing. I mean, currency equals debt. And when you hold a currency, you're holding a debt instrument. And so all of those will decline in value relative to other things. Now, will the dollar decline more than other currencies? It's almost certain that we're going to come into this environment. We're in this environment in which there's a shifting of those currencies. So you're going to see more of China's renminbi being used. You're seeing India have a direct link with Russia on the currency. So we're in an important change in the currency. But how that is a store of wealth is a different question. So a currency is a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. And its storehold of wealth is now a problem, particularly for the dollar, but it's also a problem for other countries. So that's why you have inflation. As money goes into other things and the cost of borrowing is so low relative to the inflation rate, then it encourages the borrowing of money and the sale of money. In other words, not holding financial assets like that. So yes, I think you're changing the nature of what money is and what the dollar is as a storehold of wealth.